They fined me $500 for tire tracks in the snow. Not for damaging property, not for blocking access, not for doing something reckless or dangerous, for doing the exact same thing I had done for 7 straight winters, waking up before sunrise, firing up my truck, and clearing the only road that kept 73 families connected to the outside world. And the part that really gets me, I never asked for a dime. See, up where we live, this isn't one of those neighborhoods where you argue about lawn height or mailbox color. This is a mountain community, real mountain. The kind where snow doesn't fall gently, it buries. The kind where a storm doesn't inconvenience you, it traps you. We're sitting at over 9,000 feet, 1 road in, 1 road out. 2 miles of steep switchbacks that turn into an ice chute the second the temperature drops. If that road isn't cleared, nothing moves. Not cars, not ambulances, not school buses, nothing. And for 7 years, that road stayed open because of me. Every storm, no matter how bad, I was out there before anyone else woke up. 4:30 a.m., sometimes earlier, while the rest of the neighborhood was still asleep. I'd already be halfway up the mountain, pushing snow off those curves, making sure people could get to work, get their kids to school, get to the hospital if they needed it. No contract, no paycheck, no recognition, just doing what needed to be done. And then one morning, I get a letter. Official HOA letterhead. Thick paper. The kind that feels expensive for no reason. My name printed neatly across the front like I'm about to receive some kind of award, except it wasn't an award. It was a fine, $500 for unauthorized snow removal activity and non-compliant tire tracks on HOA-maintained property. I read that line 3 times. Non-compliant tire tracks. I actually laughed at first. I thought it had to be a mistake. Some kind of mix-up. Maybe they meant someone else. Maybe someone complained about damage somewhere and my name got pulled into it. But then I flipped the page. Photos, clear as day. My truck, my plow, angles from different spots along the road like someone had been following me, documenting everything. Timestamps, close-ups of the tracks. Evidence someone hadn't just noticed what I was doing. They had been waiting for it. That's when it stopped being funny. I stood there in my kitchen, letter in one hand, coffee going cold in the other, and felt something shift. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter than that. Something heavier. Because this wasn't just a fine. This was a message, and it came from the new HOA president. Vivian. She'd moved in less than a year ago. Clean, polished, organized, the kind of person who brings a binder to a casual meeting. Everything about her screamed control. Rules, structure, appearances. At first, people thought it was a good thing. Fresh perspective, they said. Professional standards. That was her favorite phrase. Professional standards. Turns out, that included shutting down anything she didn't control. Even if it worked. Even if it had worked perfectly for 7 years. Even if it kept people safe. I remember the first time she brought it up in a meeting. She didn't say my name. Didn't have to. We need to address liability exposure, she said, flipping through her notes like she was presenting a case in court. We currently have residents operating heavy equipment on community property without formal agreements or oversight. You ever sit in a room and know exactly who's being talked about without a single word directed at you? That was me. Some people tried to speak up, said I'd been doing it for years, said there'd never been a problem, said it saved the community. Money, she just smiled. That kind of smile that looks polite on the surface, but doesn't reach the eyes. Capability, she said, is not the same as accountability. That was the moment everything changed, because it wasn't about safety. It wasn't about liability. It was about control. And a few weeks later, That control turned into a rule. No more unauthorized work on HOA property, no exceptions. Which meant me, so I stopped. At least. I tried to, because the thing about habits, especially the kind built over years, is they don't just disappear because someone writes a rule. The first storm after that decision hit hard. Overnight accumulation, heavy wind, the kind of storm that turns everything white and silent in a matter of hours. I woke up like I always did. Same time, same routine. Sat there with my coffee, staring out at the road, waiting because every instinct I had told me to get up, go outside, start the truck, and do what I'd always done. But the letter was still sitting on the counter. So I didn't move. I just watched the snow pile up, watched the road disappear, watched the world slow down to a standstill, and I told myself, this is what they wanted. This is what professional standards looks like. But then the calls started. Neighbors, friends, people I'd helped for years. Hey, are you going out this morning? Road's getting bad. Bus can't make it up here. Can you take a quick pass? Each call felt heavier than the last, because it wasn't just about snow anymore. It was about responsibility. And the truth is, broke, not completely. Just enough. I went out, cleared a single lane, made it safe, made sure people could get through 40-5 minutes. That's all it took, same as always. And for a moment, everything felt normal again, until 4 days later. When that letter showed up, $500 for tire tracks. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't even about the road. This was about drawing a line and making sure I knew exactly where I stood on the wrong side of it. So, I paid the fine. Not because I agreed with it, but because I understood something. In that moment, if they wanted control, I was going to give it to them completely. No more favors, no more early mornings, no more stepping in when things got bad. Nothing. And 3 days later, when the next storm rolled in, that decision turned into something nobody in that community was ready for. So let me ask you this. If you spent 7 years helping people for free, and then got punished for it, would you keep helping? Or would you do exactly what they asked? Because what I did next changed everything. Up here, if that road closes, everything stops. That's not an exaggeration. It's not one of those dramatic lines people throw in to make a story sound bigger than it is. It's just the reality of living where we live. Our community sits high in the Colorado mountains, the kind of place people dream about when they're stuck in city traffic or scrolling through vacation photos. Pine trees, open sky, quiet mornings, elk wandering through backyards like they own the place. On a clear night, stars are so bright you don't need a flashlight to walk across your driveway. It's beautiful, but beauty up here comes with a price. Most people don't understand until they live it. Isolation, their single quotes, S1, way in. Way out, a single road that snakes up the mountain for just over 2 miles. Tight switchbacks, steep grades, no guardrails in some sections. In the summer, it's a scenic drive. In the winter, it's a test. Because once the snow starts falling, that road stops being scenery. It becomes survival. We're not talking about a light dusting you can brush off with a broom. We're talking feet. Storms that drop 2, sometimes 3 feet overnight. Wind that piles it into drifts taller than your truck. Temperatures that turn anything packed down into solid ice by morning. And when that happens, you don't just drive carefully. You don't drive at all. Cars get stuck halfway up the first incline. Tires spin, engines strain, and within minutes, you're sliding sideways with nowhere to go. I've seen it happen more times than I can count. One bad attempt, and suddenly the entire road is blocked. And if the road is blocked, nobody's getting out. Not the parents trying to get their kids to school. not the guy who needs to make it. To work, not the elderly couple who just ran out of medication, not the ambulance. That's the part people don't think about. Up here, emergency services aren't just a phone call away. They're a race against conditions. And if that road isn't clear, even the best responders in the world can't reach you in time. That's why the road matters. That's why it always mattered. And for 7 years, whether anyone said it out loud or not, I was the reason it stayed open. I'm not saying that to brag. It's just a fact. I've been working heavy equipment my entire life. 3rd generation, my grandfather ran dozers. My dad did excavation work all over the Rockies. I grew up around engines, steel, and dirt. Learned early how machines behave, how weather changes everything, how one bad decision in the wrong conditions can cost you more than just time. By the time I was in my 20s, I was already running my own jobs. 30 years later, there isn't much I haven't seen when it comes to moving earth or snow. So when we moved into this community 8 years ago, I noticed the problem immediately. First winter, first storm, I watched the contracted plow company try to handle that road. 6 hours. That's how long it took them. 6 hours to clear 2 miles. By the time they finished, the snow had already started piling back up again. People were stuck, frustrated, late for work, kids missing school, and the bill. $1,200 for one storm. I remember standing there watching their truck struggle around one of the switchbacks, blade barely cutting through the buildup, and thinking, this isn't going to work. Not up here, not with storms like this. So I went to the HOA president at the time. Bill. Good man. Straightforward, the kind of person who understood what it meant to live in a place like this. No ego. No nonsense, just practical. I told him I had the equipment, the experience, the time in the early mornings before my regular work started. I said I'd do it. For free. He looked at me like I just solved a problem he'd been carrying for years. You sure? He asked. Yeah, I said. It needs to get done. And that was it. No contract, no paperwork, no formal agreement, just a handshake. And from that point on, every storm I was there, it became routine. Alarm at 4:30 a.m. coffee. Always strong. Step outside into that sharp, freezing air that hits your lungs and wakes you up faster than anything else. Snow crunching under your boots, or sometimes not crunching at all. Because it's too deep, fire up the truck. That low diesel rumble cutting through the quiet, echoing across the trees. Then I'd head out. First pass was always the hardest. Cutting through untouched snow, figuring out where the drifts had formed overnight. Feeling the resistance through the blade. You learn to read the road even when you can't see it. You know where the curves are, where the drop-offs are. Where? The wind tends to pile things up. It's not just driving, it's instinct. And once that first path was carved, everything else got easier. Widening the lane, clearing turnouts, making sure there was enough space for 2 vehicles to pass if needed. By the time most people were waking up, the road was already open, safe, usable, normal. And that's the thing about doing something like 16 Live, that consistently it disappears. People stop thinking about it, not in a bad way. Just naturally, when something works every single time, it becomes invisible. No one wakes up and says, wow, the road is clear again. They just get in their car and go. That was fine with me. I didn't need recognition. Didn't need thanks. The quiet nods, the occasional wave, the thermos of coffee someone would hand me at the end of a long storm, that was more than enough. Because up here, it's how things are supposed to work. You take care of each other. There were times I went out in conditions most people wouldn't even consider stepping into. Whiteout storms where you could barely see 10 feet ahead. Wind so strong it pushed the truck sideways. Nights where the temperature dropped so low the hydraulics started to stiffen. Didn't matter if it was snowing. I was out there because I knew what happened if I wasn't. I knew what it meant for Marcus down the road who needed regular medical care. I knew what it meant for families with kids trying to keep some sense of normal routine. I knew what it meant for people who simply didn't have the kind of vehicle or experience needed to handle those conditions. The road wasn't just a convenience. It was the difference between being connected and being cut off completely. And over time, something else happened. The community got used to being okay. Storms came and went. Snow piled up and got cleared. Life kept moving. No panic. No chaos. No emergencies tied to the road being impassable. 7 years of that, 7 winters, where everything just worked, and because it worked, nobody questioned it. Nobody thought about changing it. Nobody asked, what happens if this stops? Until the day it did. But before that, before the fine, before the letters, before the conflict, there was something important about those 7 years' trust. Not the kind you talk about in meetings or write into policies. The kind you build quietly over time. Every early morning. Every cleared path. Every storm handled without complaint. People trusted that when the snow came, a road would be taken care of. They trusted they could wake up, look outside, and know things were under control. And I never gave them a reason to doubt that, not once. No missed storms, no half-done jobs, no loose sticks. Just consistency. That's what made everything that came later hit so hard. Because when you build something like that, when you become part of the system that keeps people side-fanned, then suddenly you're told you're a problem. It doesn't just feel wrong. It feels like the ground shifted under your feet. Like everything you thought mattered didn't. And the worst part, most people didn't see it coming. They didn't see how fragile that system really was. How quickly it could fall apart if the wrong person decided to fix something that wasn't broken. Because from the outside, it all looked simple. It looked like a road. It looked like snow. It looked like something any contractor could handle. But the truth was, that road didn't stay open because of a contract. It stayed open because someone cared enough to make sure it did. And the moment that care got replaced with control, everything changed. The change didn't happen all at once. There wasn't some big announcement or dramatic moment where everything flipped overnight. It was quieter than that. Slower. The kind of shift you don't fully notice until you're already standing in the middle of it. It started when Bill left. Most people didn't realize how much of the community's balance rested on him until he was gone. He wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, didn't run meetings like a courtroom. He just understood the place. Understood that living up here required flexibility. That not everything needed to be written into a rule book to work. When his wife got sick, everything else stopped mattering. He stepped down, moved closer to treatment, and just like that, the steady hand that had been guiding things for years disappeared. For a while, things stayed the same out of habit. The routines we'd built didn't just vanish overnight. People still waved to each other. Meetings were still casual. Decisions still made with a kind of quiet agreement that came from years of shared experience. And then Vivian arrived. She didn't just move into the neighborhood. She arrived from the very beginning. There was a sense that she wasn't here to blend in. She was here to change things. You could see it in the way she carried herself. Always put together, always precise. The kind of person who notices details most people wouldn't even think about. Perfect hair, spotless clothes, everything coordinated. Like she was stepping into a meeting even when she was just walking down the road at first. People were polite, friendly. That's how it works up here. You don't assume the worst about someone just because they're new. She introduced herself, talked about her background years in pharmaceutical sales, corporate experience, management. She used words like efficiency and structure and standards. Some people nodded along. It sounded good on the surface, but there was something underneath it, something that didn't quite fit. Because, up here, things don't run on corporate structure. They run on understanding. And she didn't understand the difference. When she ran for HOA president, it wasn't aggressive. It was calculated, organized. She had a plan, talking points, a clear message, professionalize the community. That was her phrase. Over and over again. At the time, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like improvement, like maybe things would be a little more organized, a little more efficient. She won by a small margin, just enough to take control. And that's when the tone shifted. The first meeting, under her leadership, felt different the moment you walked in. Same room. Same old coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on a burner since the late 90s. Same folding chairs, but the atmosphere, completely different. Vivian sat at the head of the table, not casually like Bill used to, but positioned. Papers stacked, neatly in front of her. Tabs sticking out of a binder, color-coded. Everything arranged with intention. She didn't chat before the meeting started. Didn't make small talk. She waited, and when everyone was seated, she began exactly on time. Let's come to order. Even the way she said it felt formal, sharp. Then she started going through an agenda. Not a loose outline like before. A structured list, item by item. No deviation at first. It was small things. Revisiting landscaping guidelines, clarifying parking rules, talking about visual consistency and community image. People listened. Some agreed. Some didn't. But nothing felt urgent yet. Then, she got to the part that mattered. Next, she said, flipping a page, we need to discuss liability exposure regarding unregulated volunteer services. The room went quiet. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Just a pause. The kind where everyone knows something's coming, but no one said it yet. She continued without looking up. Currently, we have individuals performing work on HOA maintained property without formal contracts, oversight, or board authorization. Still didn't say my name. Didn't have to. You could feel it in the room, people shifting slightly in their seats. A few glances in my direction. That unspoken acknowledgement. Trevor was the first to speak. Dalton's been plowing that road for years, he said. No issues. He's got the equipment, the experience. Vivian raised a hand slightly, just enough to stop him. Capability, she said, finally looking up, is not the same as accountability. There it was again. That phrase, she said it like it settled everything, like it closed the argument before it even started. Rosa spoke next. Hesitant, but firm. He's helped all of us, she said. We've never had a problem. Vivian smiled. That same controlled smile. I'm sure his intentions are good, she replied. But from a legal standpoint, intentions don't protect the community from liability. She let that sit for a moment, then leaned slightly forward. If an incident were to occur, damage, injury, anything of that nature, the HOA could be exposed to significant risk. Without a formal agreement, without proper oversight, we have no protection. It sounded reasonable. That's what made it effective. She wasn't attacking. She was reframing, taking something that worked and presenting it as a problem. One of her. Allie spoke up. So, what's the solution? Vivian didn't hesitate. We implement a professional standards initiative. All services performed on HOA property must be approved by the board and conducted under formal contract. There it was, clean, simple, official, and in one sentence. Everything changed. Trevor leaned forward again, so he can just sign a contract. Then, right. Vivian's expression didn't change. He can submit a bid, she said. Like any other service provider. Like any other service provider. 7 years of doing the job. And suddenly, I was just another bidder, another option, another. Line item, I sat there listening. Not saying anything yet, because I was trying to understand, trying to figure out if this was really happening the way it sounded, or if I was missing something. But then she called for a vote. Just like that. No extended discussion, no deep dive. No consideration of what had been working for years. A motion. A second hands raised 4 in favor, 3 against. And with that, it was done. 7 years of routine, trust, and reliability. Reduced to unregulated activity. In under 10 minutes, the meeting moved on. Just like that, next item. As if nothing significant had just happened. But for me, everything had. I walked out before it ended. Didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene, just stood up, stepped outside, and let the cold air hit me. It was quiet out there. The kind of quiet you only get in the mountains right before a storm. You could smell it in the air, snow coming. Marcy followed me a minute later. "She's going to be a problem," she said. I nodded, not because I was angry. Not yet, because I could see where this was going. It wasn't about making things safer. It wasn't about improving anything. It was about control. About replacing something organic with something managed. About taking a system that worked because people trusted each other and turning it into one that only worked if it went through her. And the thing about people like that, they don't stop halfway. They don't say, "Let's adjust this." They say, "Let's own it." That's what that vote was. Ownership over the road, over the process, over the decision of who gets to help and who DOESN, single quotes. 2 weeks later, formal notice. Cease all unauthorized snow removal operations immediately. That phrase again, unauthorized, like I'd been doing something wrong all along. Like the past 7 years didn't exist. Like none of it mattered. And right there, in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't just a policy change. It was a line in the sand. And I was standing on the wrong side of it. I didn't go looking for a fight. After that meeting, after the vote, after the letter telling me to stop, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to follow the rules exactly. No arguing, no pushing back, no trying to convince anyone they were wrong. Just compliance, because sometimes the fastest way to show someone a bad decision is to let it play out. So when the next storm rolled in, I didn't touch the truck. That was harder than I expected. You don't build a habit like that for 7 years and just turn it off like a switch. My body still woke up at 4:30. My mind still ran through the checklist feel. Hydraulics, blade angle, route. I stood at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee, watching the snow fall under the porch light, and every instinct I had told me to go. But the letter sat on the counter. Cease all unauthorized snow removal operations immediately. So I stayed by sunrise. The road was already getting bad. By mid-morning, it was borderline impassable, and the calls started coming in. At first, just a couple. "Hey Dalton, you heading out today? Road's getting rough. Bus can't make it up the first turn." I gave the same answer every time. HOA rules. I'm not allowed. There was always a pause on the other end. Confusion first, then frustration. Seriously. Since when? Come on, just take one pass. I hated those calls. Not because of the people, but because I knew exactly what they were dealing with. I could picture it without even stepping outside. Tires spinning, engines whining, people standing in their driveways, staring at a road they couldn't use. But I didn't move. I kept repeating the same line. Call the board. By noon, things had gotten worse. A few people tried to make it out anyway. You could see the tracks from my window, vehicles pushing into deeper and deeper snow until they stopped completely. One car ended up angled sideways across a curve, blocking half the road. That's how it starts. One stuck vehicle turns into two. Two turns into a full blockage. And suddenly, nobody's going anywhere. I stood there watching it happen, not with satisfaction, not with anger, just awareness. This is what they asked for. This is what professional standards looks like. The storm eased up later that afternoon. Not a huge one, but enough to cause real problems if nobody stepped in. And that's where I made my mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was just habit winning one more time. Because around 5 p.m., I saw Marcus standing at the edge of his driveway, 74 years old, diabetic, lives alone. The kind of guy who doesn't ask for help unless he absolutely has to. He was looking at the road like it had betrayed him. I watched him for a minute. Then I set my coffee down. "Don't," Marcy said quietly from behind me. "I know," I replied, but I was already heading for the door. Some lines are harder to hold than others. I fired up the truck, the engine cutting through the stillness like it always did, and drove out just one pass. That's what I told myself. Not a full job, not the whole route, just enough to make it safe. Enough to get people moving again. 40-5 minutes, that's all it took. Same as always. Blade down. Snow rolling off to the sides. Clearing the main path, opening up the turns, making sure no one was stuck behind someone else's bad attempt. By the time I finished, the road was usable again. Not perfect, but safe. Cars started moving. People got where they needed to go. Marcus waved as I passed his place. I nodded back, and for a moment, everything felt right again. Like maybe this whole thing had been overblown. Like maybe common sense would win out. Maybe the board would realize what had happened. Maybe they'd understand. Maybe they'd let it go. I parked the truck, went inside, and didn't think much more about it until 4 days later. That's when the second letter arrived, certified mail this time. I had to sign for it, Joel. The mail carrier handed it to me with a look that said he already knew what was inside. "Good luck," he muttered. That was never a good sign. I took it inside, set it on the table, and stared at it for a few seconds before opening it. Same letterhead, same heavy paper, same clean printed font that made everything feel more official than it needed to be. I unfolded it slowly. Notice of violation and fine. There it was. No warning, no conversation, no acknowledgement of context. Just a violation and a number. $500 for unauthorized equipment operation on HOA property. I exhaled slowly and kept reading. Photographic evidence attached. I flipped the page. 3 photos, different angles, different points along the road. My truck, my plow. The tracks behind me, time-stamped, documented, deliberate. Someone had been watching. Not casually, not accidentally. They had been waiting for me to step out of line. Waiting for me to do exactly what I'd done for 7 years, so they could turn it into a violation. That's when it stopped being about rules. This wasn't enforcement. This was targeting. Marcy stepped up beside me and read over my shoulder. "They find you for helping people," she said. "Looks like it." There was a silence in the kitchen after that, the kind that doesn't need to be filled, because both of us understood what this meant. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't an overreaction. It was intentional. I sat down at the table and read the letter again, every word, every line. Payment due within 14 days to avoid further action, including potential lien proceedings. Lien on my house over tire tracks. I almost laughed again, almost, but the humor was gone. Now replaced with something sharper, clearer, because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about what happens when someone in a position of authority decides that control matters more than outcome, more than safety, more than common sense, more than people. I picked up one of the photos and studied it. There, I was mid-pass, snow pushing off the blade, tracks. Behind me, cutting a clean path through what had been a blocked road dot. Evidence that word stuck with me. Evidence of what? Of helping, of doing something that benefited everyone. Or evidence that I hadn't followed the rules. Because that's what this came down to. Not whether the road needed to be cleared, not whether people benefited, not whether it prevented. A bigger problem, just one thing. I didn't have permission, and that, apparently, was worth $500. I set the photos down carefully, not crumpling them, not throwing them away, just placing them back in the envelope, like they mattered. Because in a way, they did. They told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to go. This wasn't going to be resolved with a conversation. It wasn't going to be fixed with logic. It wasn't going to change because someone realized it didn't. Make sense? This was a system now, and in that system, I wasn't a solution, I was a problem. Marcy sat across from me. "What are you going to do?" She asked. I didn't answer right away, because the answer mattered not just for me, but for everything that came next. I could fight it, call a meeting, argue my case, lay out the years of work, the money saved, the safety provided. I could refuse to pay, push back, make it a conflict right now, or I could do something else, something quieter, something that didn't look like resistance at all. I reached for my phone, opened my banking app, and paid the fine right there. $500 gone. Marcy watched me. Confused. "Why would you just pay it?" she asked. I looked up at her, because I'm done fighting the way they expect me to. That's when it clicked. Not just for her, for me too. This wasn't about proving I was right. It was about letting them prove they were wrong. On their own, I folded the receipt, set it next to the letter, and leaned back in my chair. Because now, wasn't going to break the rules again? Not once. No more, just one pass. No more stepping in when things got bad. No more helping without permission. They wanted control. They could have it, all of it. And the next time it snowed, they were going. To learn exactly what that meant, I meant it when I said I was done, not in the heat of a moment kind of way, where you say something just to get through the frustration. Not the kind of "I'm done" that fades the next time things get difficult. I meant it in a quiet, final way, the kind where you don't need to repeat it, the kind where you just stop. No more exceptions, no more stepping in, no more bending the rules because you know better. They didn't want me out there. Fine, I wasn't going out there, and for the first time in 7 years, when the next storm hit, I did nothing. It started late at night. You could hear it before you could see it. That low, steady hiss against the windows. The wind picking up, pushing the first waves of snow across the ground like it was testing the terrain before committing by why. Midnight, it was steady by 3 a.m. It was heavy, the kind of snowfall that doesn't just cover things, it erases them. I woke up at 4:30 like I always did. Didn't need an alarm. My body still ran on the same schedule, even if my role had changed. For a moment, forgot. That split second where your mind hasn't caught up yet, and everything feels normal. I sat up, already thinking about the route. First pass up the lower stretch. Watch the second switchback for drifting. Check the culvert near the midpoint. Then, I looked out the window, and it hit me. The road was already disappearing. I got up, walked into the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, and stood there staring out at the snow piling up under the porch light. Every instinct in me was screaming to move. This was the kind of storm you don't wait on. You don't let it build. You get ahead of it early, keep it manageable. That's how you prevent it from turning into something worse. That's what I'd always done, but not this time. Marcy came in a few minutes later, wrapped in a blanket, still half asleep. "You're not going out?" she asked. I didn't take my eyes off the window. "No." She watched me for a second. "You're really doing this?" "Yeah." There wasn't anything else to say, because we both knew what this meant. By 7 a.m., the situation had changed. The road wasn't just covered, was gone. What had been a clear path the day before was now a smooth, unbroken sheet of white. No tire tracks, no signs of movement. Just snow, layered and drifting, filling in every curve, every incline. The kind of surface that looks almost peaceful until you try to drive on it. The first call came at 7:15. "Dalton, you heading out today?" Same tone as always. Casual, expecting the same answer they'd gotten for years. I took a sip of coffee before replying. "No." There was a pause. "What? Do you mean no?" "HOA rules. I'm not allowed to plow." Silence. Then, "Come on, man. It's getting bad out here." "I know. So you're just not going to do anything?" "That's what they told me to do." Another pause, longer this time. "All right," he said finally. "I'll call the board." "Good idea." Call ended. I set the phone down. It didn't stop after that. It got worse. By 8 a.m., my phone was ringing constantly, texts piling up, voicemails coming in faster than I could listen to them. "Amanda, the bus can't make it up here. Kids are stuck. What's going on?" "Trevor, roads completely buried. You seriously not going out?" Someone I barely knew. "My wife has an appointment in town. We can't even get to the main road." Same answer every time. "I'm not allowed. Call the HOA." Each time I said it, it got a little heavier. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I knew exactly what they were dealing with. I could picture every section of that road in my head, where the drifts would be forming, which turns would be impassable first, where someone would try to push through and get stuck. And right on schedule, it started happening. Around 9 o'clock, I saw the first attempt. A pickup truck from halfway down the road tried to make it up the incline. It made it maybe 50 yards before the tires started spinning. Snow packed under the wheels, traction gone. The truck fishtailed slightly, corrected, then stopped completely. The driver got out, looked at the road ahead, and just stood there. You could tell from the body language he already knew that truck wasn't going anywhere. 10 minutes later, another vehicle tried, same result. Now there were two vehicles stuck, angled just enough to make it harder for anyone else to even attempt it. That's how it cascades. One failure turns into a barrier turns into a shutdown. By 10 a.m., the entire road was effectively closed, and I was still standing in my kitchen. Doing nothing, Marcy walked in again, watching me. "This is getting bad," she said. "I know. Q could fix this in an hour. I know." She didn't push further, because she understood something most people didn't. This wasn't about the snow anymore. This was about the consequences of a decision, and for those consequences to mean anything, they had to be felt. The calls kept coming, some frustrated, some desperate, some just confused. "Why would they stop you from doing this? I don't get it. Can't you just go anyway?" That last one came up more than once, and every time I thought about it, just for a second, because it would have been easy. No one was physically stopping me. No one was standing in my driveway blocking the truck. I could have been out there in minutes, clearing the road like nothing had changed. But then what? Another fine, another letter. Another step toward turning this into a legal fight instead of what it really was. No, if I stepped in now, I'd be proving their point, that I couldn't follow the rules, that I was the problem. So I stayed where I was. By noon, the situation had crossed from inconvenient into serious. The road wasn't just blocked, it was dangerous. Snow had drifted into deep pockets along the curves. Sections of the incline were completely buried. You couldn't even tell where the road ended and the drop-off began in some areas. That's when the tone of the calls changed. Less frustration, more urgency. Dalton. I need to get out of here. I've got a medical thing this afternoon. Kids stuck at home. We can't even get supplies. I kept answering, kept repeating the same line, but it didn't feel the same anymore because now it wasn't just inconvenience, it was impact, real impact, and still. I didn't move because I knew. Something they didn't single quotes. This was only the beginning. The storm wasn't even done yet, and neither was the lesson. Around 1:30 p.m., I got a text from Trevor. "This is getting out of hand." I stared at the message. For a few seconds before replying, "Talk to Vivian." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, "She's not answering." I nodded to myself. Of course she wasn't, because up until now, this had all been theoretical. Rules on paper, decisions in meetings, controlled environments where everything sounded reasonable. But this wasn't controlled. This was real. This was what happened when those decisions met reality, and reality didn't care about policy. By mid-afternoon, the entire community was effectively cut off. 73 families, trapped not by some natural disaster they couldn't have predicted, but by a choice to replace something that worked with something that looked better on paper, a choice to prioritize control over outcome. And I was standing there, right in the middle of it, doing exactly what they told me to do. Nothing. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It wasn't the waiting. It was knowing I could end it at any moment. One decision, one turn of the key, one pass up that road, and everything would start moving again. But I didn't, because this time, they needed to see what happened without me, not hear about it, not imagine it, see it, feel it, live, And as the snow kept falling, covering every mistake, every delay, every poor decision, that's exactly what they were starting to do. By the time the storm hit its peak, the mountain didn't just feel isolated, not quiet in a peaceful way. Quiet in a way that makes you aware of how far removed you are from everything else. No traffic sounds. No distant engines. Just wind, snow, and the occasional crack of something shifting under the weight of it all. I stood at the window most of that afternoon. Not because I needed to watch, but because I couldn't not watch. You spend years being the reason something works, and then suddenly you're not part of it anymore. You don't just switch that off. Your brain keeps tracking everything. Every drift, every buildup, every section of road that you know without seeing it is getting worse by the minute. By 3 p.m. The road wasn't just buried, it was gone, completely erased under layers of wind-packed snow, the kind that settles hard, not the light powder you can push aside easily. This was the heavy stuff, the kind that builds resistance, the kind that turns a simple plow job into something that requires time, precision, and experience, and the kind that punishes mistakes. That's when the email came through. Not a phone call, not a knock on the door, an email, subject line, update on snow removal status. I opened it, already knowing what I was going to read. Due to extreme weather conditions, Cascade Mountain Services is unable to safely operate at this time. Crew will resume operations once conditions improve. I read that line twice. Unable to safely operate. The same road I had cleared for 7 years in worse storms than this. The same road that was now too dangerous. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. There it was, the first crack. Because up until now, everything Vivian had pushed had been built on one assumption: that replacing me with a professional company would improve things, more structure. More accountability, less risk. And now, in the exact moment that mattered most, that system had failed. Not partially, completely. No plow, no backup plan, no solution. Just an email. By 4 p.m., the situation had escalated beyond inconvenience. Beyond frustration, it was a full-blown problem. Cars were stuck in driveways. People couldn't leave, and more importantly, people couldn't get in. That's when the first emergency hit. Marcus, I didn't get the call directly this time. It came through a chain of messages, neighbors relaying information faster than the HOA ever could. Marcus fell. Outside. His place, think it's his hip. I felt that one in my chest, not anger, not frustration. Something heavier, because I knew Marcus. Not just in passing, I knew his routine, his condition, the fact that he relied on regular medical visits. The fact that something like this wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. And now he was down in the snow with a road that no one could use. Someone had already called 911. That part worked. What didn't work was everything after. The ambulance tried to come up, made it less than a mile, got stuck, fire department followed, same result. Too much snow. Too little clearance. No path to work with. I stood there listening to updates come in, piece by piece, like watching a slow-motion collapse. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. This wasn't a debate about policy or liability. This was the real world. Consequence of a decision made in a meeting room, and then the helicopter came. You could hear it before you saw it. That deep, rhythmic thump of the rotors cutting through the air, echoing off the mountains. It grew louder as it approached until it was right overhead, pushing snow outward in every direction. For a moment, entire world turned into a white storm inside a storm. They lowered a basket, neighbors helped stabilize it. Marcus was lifted. Up slowly, carefully, disappearing into the gray sky. And just like that, he was gone, on his way to a hospital by air. Because the road, the one thing that should have made that unnecessary, was unusable. I stood there long after the helicopter, disappeared, coffee in my hand, cold. Because I'd stopped drinking it. A while ago, Marcy came up beside me. "This isn't your fault," she said quietly. I nodded, because logically, I knew that. I knew who made the decisions. I knew who shut things down. I knew who replaced a working system with something that couldn't handle reality, but logic doesn't stop the feeling. The feeling that if I'd just gone out there, if I'd just ignored everything and done what I always did, maybe that helicopter wouldn't have been necessary. Maybe Marcus wouldn't be dealing with a $30,000 medical evacuation bill on top of everything else. Maybe. That word sticks with you. But maybe doesn't change what happened. And more importantly, it doesn't change why it happened. That night, the storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. Snow kept falling. Wind kept pushing it into deeper drifts. The road, already gone, was now buried under even more layers. By morning, it wasn't just impassable. It was unrecognizable. No markers, no edges. Just a white expanse where a road used to be. And still. No plow, no engine sounds, no sign that anyone was coming to fix it. That's when the second wave of consequences hit. School district notification. Buried in policy. But very real when triggered. If access roads aren't maintained and school buses can't safely reach students, the HOA becomes liable by fines per student per day. And suddenly, what had started as a $500 fine against me was turning into thousands of dollars against the community. Every single day, the road stayed closed. I didn't need to see the official notice to know how bad that was. I'd read those regulations. Years ago, when my kids were still in school, most people don't think about them because they never come into play. Because most communities don't let things get this bad, but now it was real, and it was stacking up fast by mid-morning. Frustration had turned into anger across the neighborhood. Not at me, at the situation, at the board, at Vivian. Phones were ringing, emails flying, people demanding answers, and what they got was silence. Or worse, deflection. Another message came through from Vivian. Later that day, this one had a different tone, less confident, more defensive, due to unprecedented weather conditions. The board is actively working to secure emergency services. We appreciate your patience during this time. Unprecedented. I actually shook my head when I read that because it wasn't unprecedented, not even close. We'd had storms like this before. Worse. Even the difference wasn't the weather. The difference was the response, or lack of one, by the afternoon. Something else started happening. People began connecting the dots. The professional, the company that was supposed to handle everything, wasn't here. The road that used to be cleared every storm wasn't the person who had done it for years. Was sitting at home, not because he couldn't help, but because he'd been told not to. That realization spread quickly, faster than any official communication ever could. And with it, the tone shifted again. Now the calls weren't just asking for help. They were asking why. Why would they stop you from doing this? Why didn't they have a backup? Who made this decision? And eventually, can you fix this? That last question came up more and more, and every time I heard it, I felt the weight of it, because the answer hadn't changed. Yes, I could fix it. I could walk out to the truck, start it up, and within a few hours, everything would start moving again. The road would come back. Access restored, crisis over. But that would also erase something else. The evidence, the proof, the undeniable reality of what happens when control replaces competence. And that mattered now, more than it had before. Because this wasn't just about a fine anymore. This wasn't just about me. This was about a system that had failed the moment it was tested. And if I stepped in too early, that failure would disappear. Rewritten, explained away, blamed on the storm, instead of the decisions that made the storm unmanageable. So I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was and let the consequences continue. Because sometimes the only way people understand the value of something is when it's gone. And by the time that second day ended, everyone in that community understood exactly what had been keeping them safe for the past 7 years, and exactly what it cost to lose it. By the third day, the mountain didn't feel like a community anymore. It felt like a pressure cooker. 73 households, all dealing with the same thing at the same time. No access, no movement, no clear answer on when it would end. Frustration had turned into anger, and anger had started looking for a target. And for the first time since this whole thing started, that target wasn't me. It was Vivian. You could feel the shift. It wasn't loud at first. It wasn't people yelling in the streets or banging on doors. It was quieter than that. Conversations between neighbors, messages being forwarded, screenshots shared, questions being asked that didn't have easy answers anymore. Where is the contractor? Why aren't they here? Why wasn't there a backup plan? Why was Dalton stopped in the first place? The kind of questions that don't go away once they're asked. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, Dalton. Her voice came through, tight, controlled, but different. Not the same. Confidence as before. There was something underneath it now. Pressure. I need you to plow the road. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit there, not to be dramatic, not to make a point, but because I wanted her to hear it, to feel it, that absence of immediate help she'd created. Did you hear me? She asked. I heard you, I said. Another pause. Then you understand the situation. I understand it better than anyone. Her tone shifted slightly. This is an emergency. I leaned back in my chair. Same emergency every winter. That's not fair. No, I cut in, calm but firm. What's not fair is fining me $500 for doing the exact thing you're asking me to do right now. Silence. Real silence this time. Not a pause. Not hesitation. Just nothing. Because there wasn't a response to that. Not a good one. What do you want? She finally asked. There it was, the question that changed everything. Because now, the control had shifted. Not in a loud, obvious way, but in the only way that mattered. She needed something, and I had it. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the road that wasn't there anymore. I want it in writing, I said. What? Full authorization. From the board. Signed. Official. I'm not stepping foot in that truck without it. That can be arranged. I'm not done. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Short, controlled. Trying to stay composed, the $500 fine gets rescinded. In writing, fine. I get fuel reimbursement, okay? And full indemnification. If anything happens out there, it's on the HOA, not me. Another pause. Longer this time. That's excessive, she said carefully. No, I replied. That's professional. That word hung there between us. The same word she'd used to justify everything, now turned right back on her. I'll need to discuss this with the board, she said. No discussion, I said. You either agree or the plow stays parked. Background noise on her end. Voices muffled. Tension, then finally, fine. We agree. Just, please clear the road. Email by 8 p.m., I said. Signed by all 7 board members, and then I hung up. No goodbye. No extra words, just done. I turned around and Marcy was standing there. She agreed. She asked. She didn't have a choice. And that was the truth. Because this wasn't a negotiation. This was reality catching up at 7:42 p.m. The email came through. Official. Letterhead.clean formatting. 7 signatures at the bottom. Everything I asked for. In writing, authorization. Fine rescinded. Reimbursement, indemnification. I read it once, then again, then forwarded it. Not to the board, not to Vivian. To 2 people who mattered more at that moment, Bill Ortiz, my attorney, and Amanda, the one who had already lined up media. Got it, Bill replied within minutes. This is a confession. Amanda's response came right after. Channel 7 is ready. What time do you start? I looked at the clock. 5 a.m. That night, I didn't sit by the window, didn't watch the snow, didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. I went to the garage, turned on the lights, and walked over to the truck. It had been sitting there for days, ready, waiting, same as me. I ran my hand along the plow blade. Cold steel, solid, familiar. Checked the hydraulics, fuel, tires, everything exactly. How it should be, because I hadn't neglected it. I just paused. Marcy came out a little later, leaned against the workbench. You've been waiting for this, she said. Yeah, how does it feel? I thought about it for a second, then answered honestly. Not like revenge. She nodded. Like what then? Like balance. Because that's what it was. Not about getting even, about setting things right. At 4:30 a.m., was already awake, didn't need the alarm. Stepped outside. The storm had passed. Clear sky, cold air. Snow settled into place. Perfect conditions. I climbed into the truck, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. That sound echoed across the valley, and for the first time in days, it meant something again. By the time I reached the bottom of the road, there were people already there, neighbors standing. In the cold, watching, waiting, and just beyond them, a camera crew, lights, equipment, reporter getting ready. I nodded once, then dropped the blade and started moving. The first pass was heavy, snow deep. Packed, resistant, but it moved because it always does. When you know how to move it, the truck pushed forward, blade cutting through, throwing snow to the sides in wide arcs behind me. A road started to reappear. Not all at once, not instantly, but steadily, surely, like it had 100 times before. Only this time, everyone was watching. By 6 a.m., crowd had formed along the cleared sections, people with coffee in their hands, phones out, some just standing there, arms crossed, taking it in, watching the difference, watching the result, watching what competence looks like when it's not buried under policy. The reporter stepped forward at one point, speaking into the camera. Behind me, a community cut off for days is finally regaining access, thanks to the very person the HOA had previously fined for doing this exact work. I didn't stop, didn't acknowledge it, because this wasn't about the camera. This was about the road by 7 o'clock. I reached Vivian's house. Her white Lexus was still buried, almost completely. She stood in the driveway, no makeup, no perfect presentation, no control, just a person, watching the situation she created unfold in front of her. I stopped the truck, stepped out. The crowd was right behind me. Now, close enough to hear everything, close enough to see it clearly. I walked up to her, reached into my jacket, and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you," I said. Handing it over, she hesitated before taking it. "What is this? An invoice?" Her eyes flicked up to mine. "For what?" "For professional services." She opened it, hands shaking slightly, inside itemized. 7 years of work, fuel, maintenance, time, plus today's clearing, total $18,000. If the HOA doesn't pay, I said calmly, you're personally liable. Per your signed authorization. You can't, I can, I said. You wanted professionals. The reporter stepped closer. "Ma'am, is it true you fined this man for the same work you're now asking him to perform?" Vivian didn't answer COULD in single quotes because there wasn't a version of that answer that worked. Anymore? Not here, not now, not with everything out in the open. I turned, got back in the truck, and finished the last stretch. By 8:30 a.m., the entire road was cleared, 2 miles open, functional just like it used to be. Cars started moving, engines turning over, people leaving their driveways. Life returning. But it wasn't the same, because now everyone knew what the road was worth, what it took to keep it open, and what happened when the wrong person decided to take control of it. The applause started slow, then built. People clapping, cheering, some just nodding quietly. Marcus stood near the front, arm in a sling, gave me a thumbs up. I nodded back, because that was enough, more than enough. And as the sun came up over the mountains, lighting up the snow like nothing had happened, everyone standing there knew the truth. This wasn't about snow. It wasn't about a $500 fine. It was about the difference between control and competence. And that difference had just been made impossible to ignore.